Your mind fills the silence with stories. But what if the silence itself is the story? Let us begin here, in that soft, yet uncomfortable space, the waiting. You check your phone, nothing. An hour passes. Nothing. Your chest tightens, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. And in this silence, a storm brews, not outside, but within you. Here is where the talk begins, not with what someone else is doing, but what you begin to feel. That tension, that questioning, that invisible tug between emotional need and spiritual awareness. Now pause, just for a breath. Let the silence you feel become your teacher. Believe it or not, when he doesn't call or message you, something deeper is occurring than just a missed conversation. Something that most people overlook, not because they are naive, but because they have been conditioned to listen only to sound and not to silence. Yet in life, what is not said often carries more weight than what is. A moment of silence can echo louder in the heart than 1,000 words. And in that silence, if you learn to sit quietly and listen, not to your fears, but to your awareness, you may discover a form of truth that is not filtered through another person's behavior, but illuminated through your own self-mastery. There is a story of a woman, perhaps someone you know, or perhaps it is you. She meets someone, the connection feels promising. The first few exchanges are exciting, and her nervous system feels alive, stimulated. Days pass. One day there is no message, she waits. Another day, nothing. And in this absence, her body begins to whisper, then shout. Anxiety rises. Her thoughts race. Did I say something wrong? Did I come across as needy? Was he just pretending? But here's the truth: the silence was never the problem. The storm is what she brought into the silence. This is the first step in understanding emotional gaps. Through presence, silence is not emptiness. It's a space where all our unconscious patterns are revealed. The human nervous system is designed to seek connection. We are biologically wired to regulate emotion through relational cues. Eye contact, voice tone, a simple, "I'm thinking of you." These are not just romantic gestures, they are regulatory mechanisms. When they are absent, the body reacts with tension. It enters a state of sympathetic activation, alertness, vigilance, a racing heart. But what many people misunderstand is this: your response to someone's silence reveals not just how much you care, but how much you rely on external signals to feel safe within yourself. Let's look at this more closely. In the absence of contact, your mind doesn't remain still. It creates stories. It fills the silence with interpretation. Neuroscience calls this the brain's default mode network, the part of your mind that activates during rest, engaging in self-referential thought. It loops, replays, imagines, and anticipates. And this is not random. It is built on your past, on previous wounds, on the models of attachment you formed, often in childhood. If someone important ignored you when you were small, if your emotional needs were dismissed or inconsistently met, then today, as an adult, a missed call can feel like abandonment, even betrayal. But awareness changes everything. When you begin to as witness the story your mind writes, rather than being absorbed by it, you reclaim your power. This is presence. It is the discipline of sitting in silence, not as a victim of someone's absence, but as a student of your own emotional landscape. Many spiritual and contemplative traditions speak of this, the inner stillness where you no longer chase validation, where you no longer tremble in the unknown. It's a form of emotional sobriety, where you learn to feel the craving for connection without letting it master you. And in that space, the silence ceases to be threatening. It becomes instructive. There is an ancient Zen saying, when the archer misses the mark, he turns and looks for the fault within. But this isn't about self-blame. It's about self-reflection. When he doesn't message, You are tempted to point outward, but growth occurs when you look inward. What was triggered in you? What expectation did you attach to? What insecurity asked to be seen, not by him, but by you? This brings us naturally into the second layer, the difference between attachment and attunement. Two people can both desire closeness, but one seeks it from a wound, the other from a place of inner fullness. One says, S, if you don't message me, I fall apart. The other says, F, your silence is noticed, but it doesn't define me. Attachment is a biological mechanism. It develops early and is shaped by our caregivers. It is not a weakness, it is survival. But as we grow, our spiritual task is to evolve from attachment into attunement. That is, from seeking others to regulate our emotional world to becoming aware of what our emotions are asking for. The difference is subtle but profound. Attunement is not about reacting to someone's behavior. It is about responding to your own needs with clarity and compassion. It is the skill of recognizing, yes, I feel hurt that he didn't call, but what am I truly needing right now? Is it reassurance, connection, or perhaps a reminder that I am already enough? When you become attuned to your inner state, your relationship shift. You stop interpreting someone's silence as a verdict on your worth. You start listening to it as information, not about them, but about where you are still seeking healing. Let me share another example. A man in his early 40s came to understand this difference through the pain of a breakup. He was engaged to a woman who gradually began withdrawing. First fewer messages, then less time together. Finally, she ended it with a vague explanation. His first instinct was to question her silence. Why didn't she communicate? Why did she change? But in time, with stillness and reflection, he realized the deeper truth. He had been confusing her presence with safety. When she stopped responding, it wasn't just loneliness he felt. It was abandonment echoing from a childhood where his emotional expressions were ignored. The silence was not just hers. It was his own unmet grief returning to the surface. This kind of realization doesn't come from intellectual effort alone. It requires the willingness to sit with discomfort, to observe it without rushing to fill it. This is the essence of emotional discipline. When you discipline the mind not to chase the other person's attention, but instead to stay present with your own sensations, your emotional world begins to mature, and you stop needing the other to call in order to feel whole. Here, modern psychology and Eastern wisdom meet. Psychology teaches us that emotional regulation is a learned skill. We can train ourselves to respond with awareness, not reaction. Meditation, breath work, somatic practices, they all serve the same purpose: to increase the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where freedom lies. Eastern teachings, especially those rooted in Taoist or Zen traditions, often remind us that what we chase will run from us, and what we release may return. Though by then, we may no longer be waiting. This is not cynicism. It is the understanding that when your center is within, your peace is not negotiable. Someone's silence may still touch you, but it no longer destabilizes you. So, what does it mean, really, when he doesn't message you? It might mean he's distracted. It might mean he's no longer interested. It might mean he's testing boundaries, or simply that he's not capable of the depth you desire. But beyond all that, what matters more is what it activates in you. Does his silence cause your identity to crumble? Or does it push you deeper into self, knowing your work is not to decode his silence? Your work is to understand your own noise in response to it. The questions spiraling in your mind. Am I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Is he with someone else? These questions are not new. They are echoes of an old blueprint, one you've perhaps been living unconsciously for years. And now, because someone didn't send a message, that blueprint lights up again. But this time you can respond differently. Instead of checking your phone for the 10th time, close your eyes. Feel the ache in your chest. Place a hand on your heart. Listen, not to him, but to you. Ask gently, what part of me is hurting right now? What part of me is still waiting to be loved? Not by another, but by the one who sees me every day in the mirror. There is no greater gift than using the silence of others as a path to hear your own soul more clearly. If someone's absence can bring you back to presence, then even that pain was not wasted. And if someone's silence becomes the space where you meet yourself with more tenderness, then that absence was never emptiness. It was grace in disguise. We live in a world addicted to signals, to constant reminders that we exist, that we are wanted. But the deeper journey is not to be wanted. It is to be whole, not to be reassured, but to be at peace, not to demand messages from others, but to become the messenger to your own heart. And so, next time the silence arrives, don't run, don't chase, don't beg for connection. Instead, become still, turn inward, observe what arises, and know that the one who has mastered their response to absence has already found a presence that no one else can give and no one can take away. Believe it or not, there is a moment in every relationship when the words stop, when the attention fades, and when you are left not with an explanation, but with a feeling, a quiet emptiness where once there was energy, a message left on read, a call not returned, a gaze that no longer lingers. And yet, if you pay close attention, even when words are absent, something deeper is still being communicated. Energy never lies. In daily life, we often rely on spoken words to navigate our relationships. We look for explanations, definitions, labels, something to hold on to. But behind all these expressions, there is a more subtle form of communication constantly at play: emotional energy. You can sense it when someone enters the room without saying anything. Their presence affects the air. You can feel when someone is open, when someone is closed, when someone is available, or when they've already left you emotionally. Even if they're still physically present, this sensitivity to energy isn't mystical. It is biological. It is rooted in your nervous system's ability to perceive cues of safety, danger, warmth, or withdrawal. The vagus nerve, a central element of the parasympathetic nervous system, plays a key role in this. It helps regulate your sense of calm and social connection. When you're in the presence of someone attuned to you, your heart rate settles, your muscles soften, you feel seen. But when that attunement vanishes, when their messages stop, when the tone changes, when they become distant, your body reacts. Your physiology begins to prepare for rejection, for uncertainty, for abandonment. This is not overreacting. It is the body's ancient wisdom trying to alert you that something is out of balance. And so, when someone stops calling you, it is not just an event. It is a shift in energetic investment. Their energy has changed. And while it may be tempting to analyze their behavior, to overthink their motives, what matters more is how their energetic withdrawal affects your emotional system and what that reveals about your inner alignment. There is a short story told by a woman who was in a relationship that began with great intensity. In the beginning, they spoke every morning. Good morning texts, late night calls. Then slowly, without warning, the rhythm shifted. The check-ins became less frequent. The warmth she had once felt in his words began to cool. She asked him, "Is something wrong?" And he said, "No, I've just been busy." But energy never lies. Though the words said everything was fine, his energy said something else. He was pulling away. This dissonance, when words and energy don't match, is one of the most painful forms of confusion, because the mind hears one message, but the body feels another. And if you are not deeply grounded in your own emotional truth, you may ignore what your intuition already knows. You begin to rationalize. He's tired. He has work stress. He's just overwhelmed. You give more than is required. You adjust yourself to accommodate his distance. But in doing so, you abandon your own energetic sensitivity. You silence your own internal compass. The truth is this: when someone's energy toward you shifts, that is their communication. You don't need them to say, "I've lost interest." You don't need a dramatic ending. All you need is to trust what your body already knows. Because when someone values you, their energy aligns with their actions. And when someone is unsure, that confusion will show up not only in what they say, but in how they say it, and more importantly, in what they no longer do. There is a certain dignity that comes with learning to read energy, to trust it, and to honor your own. Because energy doesn't lie, but we often do, especially to ourselves. We lie by pretending we're not hurt. We lie by making excuses for emotional absence. We lie by accepting less than we need, hoping that one day they'll change. But your energy, your inner vitality, your emotional clarity, they all begin to diminish the moment you deny what is being silently revealed. This leads us to the mind's subtle role in all of this. The moment someone stops showing up, the mind begins to work overtime. It creates scenarios. It builds narratives. It desperately seeks meaning. This is the function of the thinking mind: to protect, to predict, to process. But here lies a danger. When the reality of a situation is painful or unclear, the mind often refuses to accept it. Instead, it creates its own version, a reality that soothes rather than confronts. This is how expectations take root, not as hopes, but as illusions. We expect someone to care as much as we do. We expect them to communicate, to stay consistent, to reciprocate. And when they don't, we suffer, not because of what they did, but because we are unwilling to let go of what we expected them to do. There is a moment in every person's journey when they must choose between the comfort of fantasy and the clarity of truth. The mind will always choose fantasy first. It will replay the sweet moments. It will focus on potential. It will say, "But he said he cared, but he held me like he meant it." The mind doesn't want to feel pain. It wants resolution. And when that resolution doesn't come, it manufactures one, even if it's false. In neuroscience, this tendency is explained by the brain's negativity bias and its addiction to closure. We are wired to complete patterns. When something begins, the brain seeks an end. But in human relationships, the end doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes the end comes with silence, with ambiguity, with a slow fading that leaves you with more questions than answers. So how do you find peace in that space? You begin by questioning your expectations. Where did they come from? Did you ever agree on them with the other person, or were they silently created in your own mind? Were they based on reality or on the version of the relationship you wanted to be true? There is a young woman who once shared that after her partner stopped calling, she felt a wave of shame. Not just sadness, but shame. She said, "So, I feel like I wasn't enough to keep him interested." But in time, through deep reflection, she came to see that it wasn't her worth that was lacking. It was her expectation that someone else would validate her worth through consistency. This shift is critical. When you hold someone else responsible for proving your value, your emotional state becomes dependent on their behavior. But when you take responsibility for how you respond to unmet expectations, you reclaim your inner authority. This is the work of self-awareness, to realize that your suffering is not caused by what happened, but by the resistance to what is. Resistance to change, resistance to loss, resistance to uncertainty. In Eastern philosophy, there is a concept called the Wu Wei, non-resistance or effortless action. It teaches that when we flow with what is, rather than clinging to what we wish were true, peace becomes possible. And so, when he doesn't call and your mind begins to spiral, you have a choice. You can tighten your grip, or you can let go, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your peace to not be imprisoned by someone else's ambiguity. It means recognizing that when someone doesn't call, it may reflect where they are on their journey. Perhaps they're emotionally unavailable. Perhaps they're inconsistent. Perhaps they lack the maturity to communicate. But that is their path, not yours to fix, not yours to chase. There is a silent power in choosing to believe what someone's actions show, rather than what their words once said. And perhaps more importantly, to believe in what your own body, your own energy, your own intuition continues to whisper. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel aligned. This doesn't feel true. But the sooner you trust that signal, the sooner you stop wasting energy trying to convince yourself otherwise. Sometimes in life, people leave without leaving. They become emotionally absent long before they physically exit. The challenge is not to keep them. The challenge is to notice the moment they begin to drift and to decide. Without drama, without anger, whether you will drift along or stand firm in your truth, you are not here to chase energy that pulls away. You are not here to beg for someone's attention. You are here to live in alignment with what is real. And reality is this: when the energy changes, the relationship changes. When the expectation is unspoken, the disappointment becomes inevitable. When the mind insists on a fantasy, the heart continues to bleed. But when you see clearly, when you truly see, you set yourself free, and from that freedom, a new way of relating is born. One that doesn't seek safety in others, but brings safety into the relationship. One that doesn't cling to promises, but listens to presence. One that doesn't ask, why hasn't he called, but asks instead, hey, how does this situation reflect the relationship I am cultivating with myself? Because the way someone treats you is one part of the story, but how you respond, that is the story of your evolution. There is a certain unspoken truth about relationships that often remains hidden beneath all the advice, books, and conversations. It is not about how to find the right person, or even how to make someone love you. The truth is this: what you tolerate is what you teach others to expect from you. And what you continue to accept becomes a silent instruction to the world about what you believe you deserve. When someone doesn't message you, when they pull away without explanation or consistency, and you continue to wait, to hope, to excuse, it's not always an act of love. Often, it is a quiet erosion of your own self-worth. But self-worth is not something that vanishes suddenly. It fades in degrees. It weakens not through dramatic betrayals, but through small, consistent acts of self-abandonment. A delay in your boundaries. A second chance you give too quickly. A silent night spent waiting for a message that never comes. Each time you remain quiet when your heart is speaking, each time you shrink yourself to keep another close, your nervous system begins to normalize that pattern. And in that normalization, you no longer feel the violation. You only feel the longing. Modern science has shown how our brain and nervous system adapt to repeated emotional experiences. Through a process called neuroplasticity, the more often you tolerate a certain behavior, the more deeply your brain wires itself to accept it as normal. This is why, after a while, red flags no longer feel alarming. They feel familiar. The human body craves familiarity, even when familiarity is painful. A child raised in chaos often becomes an adult who finds calmness suspicious. A person raised with emotional inconsistency may feel excited by relationships that mirror unpredictability, not because it is joyful, but because it is recognizable. And what is recognizable becomes safe even when it isn't kind. So when someone doesn't call you for days, and you excuse it as independence, when they come and go and you interpret it as mystery, when they give you breadcrumbs and you turn them into a feast, that is not love. That is a nervous system trained to chase validation. But you are not powerless in this pattern. You are not bound to repeat what once conditioned you. Your nervous system can be rewired. Your emotional baseline can be reset. And it begins not with trying to change them, but with learning to observe your own tolerance, what you endure, what you accept, what you silence. There's a woman who once stayed in a relationship with a man who gave her just enough to keep her from leaving, but never enough to make her feel truly loved. She told herself stories. He's not good with emotions. He's just stressed. He needs time. Months became years. Her friends watched. Her family questioned, but she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she had built her identity around waiting. Then one day, he stopped calling completely. No closure, no explanation, just silence. And in that silence, something inside her finally broke, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't chase. She simply sat in the discomfort and whispered to herself, "I've had enough." It wasn't a loud moment, it wasn't dramatic, it was a quiet decision. A return to her own body, her own breath, her own worth. And in the days that followed, something extraordinary began to happen. She no longer waited for messages. She no longer rehearsed conversations in her mind. She no longer looked at her phone with anxiety because she had stopped outsourcing her peace. What changed? Her vibration. You see, self-worth isn't just a concept, it's a frequency. It's an energy you carry in your posture, your silence, your standards. People can feel it before you speak. You teach people how to treat you not by what you say, but by what you allow. Your boundaries are not just lines, they are signals. They announce to the world, this is how I expect to be seen. This is how I deserve to be loved. And when your inner vibration is rooted in unworthiness, you attract lessons, not partners. You attract situations that challenge you to rise. You will continue to meet people who mirror your unresolved patterns until you finally choose to elevate the way you treat yourself. One of the most powerful principles in both Eastern philosophy and modern psychology is that your inner world determines your outer reality. If you want others to see your value, you must first see it yourself. If you want them to respect your time, you must stop offering it to those who misuse it. If you want love that is deep and steady, you must stop tolerating love that is shallow and inconsistent. The process of reclaiming your vibration is not about ego. It's not about proving your worth or demanding attention. It's about learning to stand so deeply in your own presence that you are no longer pulled by the tides of someone else's inconsistency. There is a story told in Eastern teachings of a monk who was asked by a student, "What is the key to love without suffering?" The monk replied, "Do not seek to be filled by another. Learn to hold your own bowl first." The student was confused. But what if someone wants to pour into it? The monk smiled. "Vave, if your bowl is empty and theirs is too, both will leave thirsty." We often forget this. We seek others to fill the voids we have not yet explored within. We chase their messages, their presence, their affection. Not because we want them, but because we fear facing the places in us that still feel hollow. But that hollowness is not a curse. It is a space for awakening. It is a sacred invitation to ask, one, what part of me still believes I am only valuable when I am chosen? And here is the paradox. When you no longer need to be chosen, you become irresistible. Not because you play games, but because your energy is whole. You stop broadcasting desperation. You stop emitting lack. You stop vibrating from the place of please pick me, and start living from the place of, I already choose myself. From this place, you begin to act differently. You don't wait for calls that don't come. You don't settle for one-sided effort. You don't pretend that someone's silence is strength. You look reality in the eye and you decide what is aligned and what is not. And here's something most people miss. Raising your vibration often means being alone for a while. It means walking away from the people who once felt like home. It means saying no to the familiar chaos. It means choosing peace over passion that burns out. It means sitting in your own company long enough to no longer fear your own presence. There is wisdom in solitude, not loneliness, not isolation, but conscious solitude. A space where your nervous system recalibrates, where your heart learns to beat without needing to sync with another. In this stillness, your standards become sacred again. And when someone new arrives, you no longer adjust your rhythm for theirs. You listen. You observe. You protect your energy like it's the most valuable treasure, because it is. People often say, I just want to be loved. But few ask, am I loving myself in the way I want others to love me? Am I respecting my time? Am I nourishing my body? Am I listening to my intuition? Am I honoring my needs? Because love isn't something you receive. It's something you practice. And the way you love yourself sets the blueprint for all your relationships. So when someone disappears, when their messages fade, when their attention wanes, the question is not, why did they stop? The deeper question is, why did I start abandoning myself to keep them close? Self-worth is not a destination. It is a daily practice. It is a moment-to-moment commitment to stay loyal to your needs, to your truth, to your vibration. It is a refusal to be emotionally underfaved in the name of potential. It is the courage to walk away when your spirit is starving. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop explaining yourself, to stop proving your value, to stop shrinking your expectations. Sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is to sit in the silence and whisper to yourself, I deserve more than this. Because you do. And the moment you believe that, not from the mind, but from the body, from the breath, from the soul, that is the moment your energy begins to change. That is the moment the world begins to respond differently. That is the moment you stop attracting lessons and begin attracting love. True love, not the kind that flickers, not the kind that disappears without warning, not the kind that needs constant chasing, but the kind that recognizes your worth without needing to be convinced. But that love will not come until your vibration aligns with it, until your standards rise to meet your potential, until your nervous system learns to feel safe in presence rather than in pursuit. What you tolerate is not just about them, it's about you. And the day you decide to stop tolerating what drains you, what confuses you, what depletes you, that is the day you begin to radiate a different frequency. And those who cannot meet that frequency will fade, not because you're unworthy, but because you finally remembered that you never needed to settle to be loved. You only needed to return to yourself. There is a silence that arrives when someone you once thought was close begins to drift away. It doesn't always come with an argument or a final goodbye. It doesn't announce itself with loud words or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it arrives quietly through fewer messages, longer pauses between responses, or a sudden shift in tone that you can't quite explain. It is in these moments that the heart feels a certain confusion, a yearning to know why, a craving for closure. But not all endings arrive with clarity. Some come as redirections cloaked in rejection. When someone stops calling you, when their message is slow, when their attention fades, the initial instinct is to chase meaning. The mind asks, why? And this why is not innocent. It is urgent. it is loaded with personal history. It's a search not only for understanding but for reassurance. The mind doesn't just want to know what happened. It wants to know that the loss wasn't because of something lacking in you. But what if the silence was not a punishment? What if it was guidance? There is a story of a woman who was deeply in love with someone who began withdrawing from her life without warning. In the beginning, they had conversations late into the night, laughter that echoed from room to room, a kind of intimacy that felt as though it could never fade. But slowly, she noticed the change. His responses came slower, his gaze became distant. She could feel him slipping away, yet when she asked, he offered no clear explanation. "Nothing is wrong," he said, but the truth was living in his distance. When he finally stopped communicating altogether, she fell into a spiral of self-blame. She replayed every word she'd ever said, every action, every choice. But eventually, after nights filled with tears and silence, she asked herself a different question. Not, why did he leave, but what am I now being asked to see? This question changed her, not immediately, but gradually. It opened a new doorway, not to him, but to herself. In life, we tend to believe that rejection is a sign of failure. We interpret distance as deficiency, but sometimes what feels like rejection is not a door closing out of cruelty. It is a door closing to redirect us back to our inner home. In Eastern philosophy, there's a teaching that says, what leaves your life creates the space for something closer to your nature. That which is not in harmony with your path will eventually fall away, and when it does, the absence may hurt, but the pain is not meant to destroy. It is meant to awaken. Every person who turns away, every unanswered message, every phone that stops ringing, they all carry the potential to lead you to yourself. But only if you stop chasing after their presence and begin listening to what their absence is teaching you. You cannot force someone to stay who has chosen to leave. But you can choose to stay present with yourself. You can choose to learn, and perhaps more importantly, you can choose to trust that the space created by their absence is not empty. It is fertile. It is alive with potential. Rejection can feel like the end of something meaningful. But often, it is only the end of an illusion, of what you wanted something to be, rather than what it truly was. When you look back with clarity, you may find that what you were grieving wasn't just the person, but the story you created around them. We are all, in some way, story makers. When we meet someone and feel connection, the mind begins to weave a future. It stitches together hopes, images, and expectations. And as time goes on, we become more attached not just to the person, but to the version of the life we imagined with them. So when they pull away, when they no longer reach out, it's not just a loss of communication. It's the unraveling of a narrative we had written in invisible ink. But just because a story doesn't unfold the way you planned doesn't mean it was meaningless. Some people enter your life to show you who you are not. Others arrive to challenge what you believe you deserve. And a few, without knowing it, teach you the art of letting go with grace. There is wisdom in the redirection that rejection offers. It forces you to reevaluate your boundaries. It invites you to reclaim your worth. It demands that you stop placing your value in someone else's hands and start tending to the parts of you that still seek validation from the outside. A man once shared a quiet realization after the woman he loved stopped responding to him altogether. He said, "For weeks, I stared at my phone like it held the answer to my loneliness. Then, one morning, I looked in the mirror and realized it wasn't her silence that was hurting me. It was the way I was abandoning myself in that silence." He spoke no louder after that, but he began speaking differently, not with his voice, but with his actions. He started running again. He called his mother. He painted, something he hadn't done in years. He became more present with his own life, and slowly, the silence stopped feeling like rejection. It began to feel like space, space to return to his essence. This is the quiet transformation that becomes available when you no longer fight.